Thank you so much for joining us here on. Sorry, take it from the top.
We're live.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much for joining us here on Catching Up with Jacob. We're going to open this week as a one-off with a hot take, looking at several key issues that have been in the media, both in the United States and somewhat globally, as they have international ramifications. This conflict we see between the judiciary and the executive branch of government in the United States has parallels in other countries, including Europe and in Israel. In Europe, once more, the judiciary was mobilized against Marine Le Pen, and she's been banned politically and legally from running for office. They simply tried to stop her legally because they could not stop her politically. Exactly what they tried to do with Donald Trump. Now, a member of Macron's government was guilty of the same thing. Yet, with impunity, absolutely nothing happens. Selective enforcement, selective sentencing, politically driven. This is what happened to Georgescu in Romania. It's what happened in Germany. The judiciary is basically becoming judicial fascism. It is no wonder that Jesus talked about you be brought before magistrates and kings. We have an out-of-control judiciary. In the United States, it is the same. We have this Judge James Bausberg demanding the repatriation of people who are not patriots, specifically gang members, narco-terrorists being brought back to the United States because they were, he says, deported illegally, even though it was done on the basis of a law that's existed since the 18th century. He's threatening to hold the Trump administration into contempt for so doing so. What does a judge have to do with this? We have judges now making legal decisions about the military and about transgenderism in the military. What does a judge have to do with being a commander-in-chief? Well, this is a global phenomenon. We've seen it in Israel, where you have a situation where the Netanyahu government tried to bring about judicial reform to stop the political action usurping the power of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. Yet this was portrayed as an attack on democracy, when in fact the attack on democracy in Europe, in Israel, and in America is primarily coming from a corrupt judiciary that has been politically weaponized. We have a case where an ICE agent is being threatened with being held in contempt of court because a person who was arrested for a very serious crime remains in custody of the federal government while a trial is going on. Now, this happens all the time. These judges are dangerous people. They're enemies of democracy. An activist judge is not a true judge. He's a political, or she is a political plant. This has been bipartisan. It is not simply the Democratic Party in America. You had Sandra Day O'Connor, appointed by Ronald Reagan. You had the judge who outlawed, the homosexual judge, federal judge, appointed by George Bush and nominated by Ronald Reagan in California, who outlawed Proposition 8 and blamed Christianity for homophobia in a legal decision. It's been bilateral. There's been guilt on both sides. One of the most wicked, contemptible people to ever disgrace the judiciary has been the Republican Sandra Day O'Connor, who ordered the Ten Commandments out of the judicial building. Republicans have been as guilty of this as Democrats. But the real struggle is for the Constitution. But on back of that, there's another struggle. There are demonic powers on back of these things. The democratic will of the electorate, of the people, is being negated by a corrupt judicial system with corrupt judges. Judicial activism must be grounds for impeachment of a judge, as if it were a crime. Judicial activism must be grounds for impeachment. Again, Republicans did this, as well as Democrats. When you had Roberts, the Chief Justice, a Bush Republican, took Obamacare and rewrote it as a tax. He took legislation and rewrote the legislation with wording to make it a tax so it could be legalized, because the Supreme Court said the government cannot afford force people to buy an insurance product. So he just rewrote it as a tax. This is an out-of-control judiciary, and it is not simply liberal and progressives who have done it. It has been rhinos, it has been establishment Republicans, and they have been among the very worst. But it is not simply American. It is happening in Israel. It is happening in Europe. Seriously happening. Democracy is being undermined by unelected judges. They are not interpreting laws, they are rewriting laws. They are redefining laws based on their own political ideologies to which they subscribe, which is usually of some left-wing orientation. And again, it's not peculiar to any one particular party. This is what is happening. You'll be brought before magistrates and kings in one of the synoptic accounts. The story goes on. You have a police force that is a political police force. It's not there to protect the public. Radical Muslims are allowed to engage in the unspeakable. You have gangs of Muslim pimps in Great Britain pimping off English girls with impunity because of political pressure. Yet people putting things on the internet, criticizing the school system, are being arrested for posting their opinion democratically about the school system. That becomes the crime. Now they're threatening to arrest Christian preachers by statute. Until now, they've just been arresting them. Now they're trying to make it illegal in certain councils in Great Britain, including one very close to London. This is out of control, seriously out of control. It is not just the judiciary, it is the justice system. It is the police. And again, the FBI did the same thing, putting Christian parents on terrorist watch lists because they objected to the indoctrination of their children with transgenderism in the primary school age children. This is how corrupt and how evil our government is, our criminal justice system is, our judges are. We need to pray desperately. We need to pray desperately that the Supreme Court will not think it's the supreme being, and that these judges will stand before the judge if they don't repent. The judiciary, in its corrupted state, has probably become the #1 threat to democracy in the Western world. I'll say it again. The out-of-control, activist judiciary that we see in country after country, including the United States, is the #1 threat at the present moment to the survival of democracy. They are legislating from the bench. That should be impeachable. Let's continue looking at some of these other things. What else we see happening is the usual Goebbels escapade. Tell a lie often enough and people will think it is the truth. Every real economist knows that inflation comes by overexpanding the money supply. It is governments and central banks that cause inflation. We are being lied to repeatedly and repeatedly every hour in the international media and in the American news media, the mainstream media, that Mr. Trump's tariffs are going to cause inflation. Either they're completely ignorant and don't know what inflation is, or they're deliberately lying. I personally think it is the latter. If you have to purchase a refrigerator or an automobile manufactured in the United States and pay more money for one than is manufactured elsewhere, what is this going to do? it's going to cause people to not buy other things. It's going to bring prices down. It's been lie upon lie upon lie. But nowhere are they lying more than about the judiciary.
All right. Good
I'm
morning.
getting mixed signals. I'm getting this and I'm getting this, and I don't know what you're saying. Sorry.
That's all right. I just wanted to welcome everyone. Welcome to Catching Up with Jacob. And you heard from Jacob on his hot take on the judges and the judiciary and what's going on. And we'll follow through with all the other topics. Welcome for another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. Episode, what is it, Jay? 180?
200 and something.
228.
Thank you so much. And we welcome you in the name of the Lord. Jacob Prash, how are you? You are really, really Cajun hot right now with the stuff going on with the judiciary.
It is unbelievable how it could be so out of control and how corrupt.
Absolutely. Well,
These judges need to be removed from the bench, and some of them belong in prison.
we got you primed up. We're ready to go for catching up. David Lister, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm upset about the judges, but I'll get us back on track.
Very good. Jay, how are you?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Good morning to you, and good morning to Davey in Australia. How are you?
Yeah, doing good, thanks, and good to be with you all again.
Welcome in the name of the Lord. Well, we'd like to welcome everyone watching us live, watching us later, different platforms, but the same content, biblical content in light of what's going on in the world. We like to look at it from a biblical perspective. And we like to welcome those who are on Rumble, those who are on Vimeo, those who are on X, ever growing, and those who watch us, of course, on all the other platforms like the soon coming Morial.tv, and of course, RTN. And what am I missing? Telegram? Missing Telegram? Yeah, Facebook Live. And
Telegram, Facebook Live.
yeah, Telegram's good. You know, it's been underrated, but it's been going on. We've had some problems with it a few months back, but I think they got those straightened out, right, Davey? Telegram? Yeah.
I always take it if I don't get a complaint that everything's running smoothly. So I haven't gotten a complaint in a while.
That's good to know. All right. Well, you can find us there. Jay, you want to talk about the podcast very quickly before we do any announcements? We want to make sure that we catch all of our platforms, including the podcast.
Absolutely. So you can catch our podcast wherever podcasts are, whether it be Apple, whether it be Spotify. They're great for travel. And make sure to make yourself available for them. Download them to your hard drives and keep them for a rainy day, which, in spring, there's usually quite a bit of rain. So you can have something to listen to, something to maybe learn.
That's right. Even in Australia, it's going to be autumn. Well, it is autumn already, and it's going to be winter pretty soon. So there you go. Australia, New Zealand, you can get a hold of that. And wonderful things. And also Memorial Chapel, right, Jay? We got good teachings on Memorial Chapel.
We continue to grow on Memorial Chapel. If you have not already, please subscribe on YouTube, Memorial Chapel. You have the Tuesday throwbacks along with all of the Bible studies, whether it be Sandy, whether it be Jacob. And of course, I believe Devore actually does the Wednesday study there as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
He's an old-time pastor. You know, you got to have the door open on Sunday and Saturday and Wednesday, just like when I was a kid. You're rare there, Marco.
Oh, well, yeah, we're like dinosaurs. We're growing out of style, but faithful to that word. Jacob Prash, you got any announcements? I think you're going to Asia, but you're coming here to the States as well.
Yes, we're coming to New York City and to Baltimore. We shall be at the Church of the Open Door in Manhattan on Saturday, the 13th, and we shall be on the Sunday, the 14th. We shall be at Church of the Open Door in Baltimore. Looking forward to seeing you then and there. We'll be with Pastor Dave Rossetto and with Brother Jerry DiMatteo in Baltimore. If you're in New York or the Washington, Baltimore area, we hope you can join us. The Church of the Open Door in New York is on uh, 3rd Avenue and 7th Street opposite Cooper Union in East Village, East Greenwich Village. Please come see us.
And
Yeah,
there's
it's the
upcoming events.
12th and 13th.
Oh, my
Jim.
apologies. It's the
That's all right.
12th and the 13th. Saturday the 12th, Sunday the 13th.
Very nice. It's right there. Go to memorial.org itinerary page and the event under events, and you can find it there. David Lister, you got any announcements before we get started?
Well, just please pray for the upcoming mission trip. Jacob, me going to the Far East. We just got a couple new prisons, actually 4 prisons now that in Thailand. Scott is getting doors open for us to get in and preach the gospel, and we're also visiting a couple older prisons that we have been to before. My favorite is Tough Guys, Chumboro. If people can remember, they have a love for the gospel, and they want Jacob to teach on Balaam and the donkey. So, but please pray for the whole mission trip. We got Vietnam, we have Thailand and Japan, and Jacob is coming to Australia and New Zealand, and Davey has some information on that Australia leg, I believe.
Yes, Jacob will be in Sydney on Saturday and Sunday, June 7th and 8th, where he'll be teaching at Sutherland Christian Fellowship there in Kirrawee, and on Tuesday, June 10th at the Novotel Brisbane Airport. There'll be 2 sessions there, one in the afternoon around 2 p.m. and an evening one at 7 p.m. Also just wanted to mention too, like the Moriel Quarterly is now out too, just especially here in Australia too. With if you haven't been receiving the Moriel Quarterly, and you're wondering what's going on, we have had a change over in administration a while back. So if you would like to receive the quarterly and are not, just email us at morielaustralia@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to add you to the subscription list there. Plus, with the USBs, Marco's the quintessential Quintana, just again, you can email us at morielaustralia@gmail.com or myself at davyrosengreen@gmail.com, and we'll get one sent out to you, or the download link, whichever you prefer. And we do hope to have a new updated USB for featuring some of Jacob's more recent teachings available by the time of Jacob's Australia visit. So they'll be available for the first time actually at the meetings here in Australia.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Davey, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much. And Jacob Prasch, let's catch up. Jacob, I wanted to ask you this before we get into the heavier subjects. Is Hungary's move, Viktor Orban, who's been a very faithful supporter of not only Israel, not only a supporter of the West and America, and especially the Trump administration, just announced that it may have an embassy move coming up to Jerusalem, as well as his policy. It is to quit the International Criminal Court over what they're doing to Netanyahu. Before we get into the heavy subjects, any thoughts on that? Any comments on that?
God will bless him and bless Hungary because of his actions. Let's remember that 80,000 Hungarian Jews were saved through the efforts of Raoul Wallenberg and collaborators within Hungary. 80,000 Jews were saved during the Holocaust from the Nazis. It is a country that had a very difficult time under the Soviet Empire on the back of the Iron Curtain. In 1958, it was the first country to try to throw off the powers of Stalin's communism that Stalin inherited with the blessings of Harry Truman after the end of the Second World War. Hungary was the first to try to stand up. Hungary is a country that I have tremendous respect for, not just because Hungarian goulash is delicious, but because they are fantastic people. I've met a number of believers from Hungary, saved Christians from Hungary over the years, and they're good and godly people. May the Lord bless him. I think he's moving in the right direction. But it's not just concerning the, again, politicized International Criminal Court in The Hague, which is a joke. And again, it is a political organ, not a judicial one. also, they are standing up to the bullying by the Brussels bureaucracy. They are standing up to the bullying by the unelected socialist bureaucrats of Brussels and defending their national interests from them. Now, they do have a problem. They do not have alternative sources of energy other than from Russia, basically. That is their vulnerability. But that is just something due to geology and geography. It's not through any policy. But again, may God bless Hungary and may God bless their government.
Yeah, he might be coming to the States when Netanyahu visits
He might.
here. So there might be a little bit of a.
After Passover, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Might
even
be a mini summit in the White House with him and
That's right.
Netanyahu and Trump.
That would be an interesting trio there.
Yes.
South Africa was trying to get people to jump on the bandwagon of the genocide case against Israel, trying to get other countries to do it. South Africa is definitely, we talked about it last week with Pierre, but it's on free fall. They even try to get Nicaragua to jump on that case. And even Nicaragua, with their crazy communists, backed off that. They're not going to support the case. Jacob, why is South Africa so hell-bent on trying to get other countries to jump on that case?
First of all, South Africa's ANC government has taken a country that had nothing but trouble and replaced one evil with the worst. It has failed completely, and it is desperate to divert the national attention and focus away from their own domestic issues, but so they can continue to manipulate primarily the black vote. They're desperate to do that and to find some other issue. And what more of a convenient scapegoat is there than Israel? Secondly, the ANC has always been funded by a cabal of Islamic businessmen from Malaysia and increasingly, formerly from Gaddafi's Libya, and then from other Arab Islamic countries. So a country that's sinking economically needs its financial lifelines, and its primarily financial lifeline comes from the anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic Islamic world. Those are the two main reasons. They forget that it was liberal white Jews who provided the legal representation for Nelson Mandela, and it was Jewish activists like Joe Slavo who were imprisoned by the regime in South Africa under apartheid for fighting for the blacks. They forget that. Much the same as the Nation of Islam and others have tried to turn black America against the Jews, forgetting that it was Jews from New York who went down to organize blacks to vote and were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan in Philadelphia, Mississippi, that it was Jews who were literally murdered by the Klan for standing up for Jews. Well, the Nation of Islam wants black America to forget that, and the ANC wants black South Africa to forget that it was Jews who stood up for the blacks against the apartheid establishment.
Yeah, revision is history and forgetting the history of it. And that's a very dangerous thing. Jacob, our first subject is de-escalation in Gaza. Of course, Israel is expanding the military to go after Hamas. They're trying to uproot it. I think to get rid of terrorists there will be the right positive move. To get rid of Hamas out of Gaza will be the right thing to do instead of a stalemate, instead of just prolonging the inevitable. Your thoughts on that? The new Morag axis, which is the corridor in southern Gaza, now that they're going after Hamas.
Israel is in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, but it's not a situation of its own making. They are suffering the ramifications of the anti-Israel policies of Biden and Harris. What should have been done was no food, water, medicine, or any kind of aid should have been allowed into Gaza until the hostages were released. Until the hostages were released, then the aid should have been allowed in and given to NGOs, not to Hamas, who were sequestering it for their own purposes. Biden wouldn't allow any of this. Biden was no friend of Israel. Biden is a de facto enemy of Israel and always has been.
That's
and
right.
always has been. Like Obama, always has been. They're enemies of Israel. So this is the situation then. They've inherited something. Well, if we increase military pressure, they might kill the hostages. But if we don't increase the pressure, they're going to keep holding the hostages.
That's
They're
right.
in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Hamas is fighting for its life. That's why it does not want to release all of the hostages. That's why. Additionally, these anti Hamas demonstrations and riots, some of those are almost certainly being orchestrated by Hamas to bring pressure on Israel. Don't attack Gaza. You'll be attacking people who are against Hamas. When in fact, Hamas is orchestrating some of those demonstrations, at least some of them. And as Melanie Phillips has rightly pointed out, even the ones who are legitimately against Hamas in Gaza, that doesn't mean they're friends of Israel.
Very true.
They would just go with the Palestinian Authority, who are just Hamas with a smile. That's it. They're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, and much of the blame belongs on Biden, on Blinken, on Harris, on Austin, and on Jake Sullivan. They've inherited this thing. What are you going to do? One way or another, Hamas must be obliterated and destroyed the way Hezbollah is being or has been largely obliterated and destroyed. They're hanging on to power desperately. They don't want to let the hostages go, so what are they going to do? We got the hostages, we'll kill them if you don't stop doing this. Well, okay, we'll stop doing this. We let the hostages go? No. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you, Barack Obama. Thank you, Kamala Harris.
Yeah, it's like the gift that keeps on giving. David Lister, your thoughts on this? It's like a strategic move to get Hamas out of there, which we totally support. But it's also a gamble. It's just going to continue on. People don't want this. Even in Israel, they don't want it. But they've been given a green light, seems to be, by the Trump administration to finish the job, which I think it's something that obviously the Biden administration handcuffed them in Rafah, handcuffed them everywhere. They wouldn't even let them get rid of Hamas during the time that they could have got rid of Hamas last year. So your thoughts on that? Risky move, conflict, or a gamble that can produce the right things?
Well, it's one of these situations the world calls damned if you do and damned if you don't. You know, they have, there's a possibility if they keep going, hostages will be shot, you know, and of course that will only inflame Israel to finish the job even faster. But there's no good move here because history tells us that if you leave an infection in the body, it's only going to get worse. And this has been true. Hamas has been an infection in the Middle East there in Gaza since the day they walked in, when they burned the greenhouses that I believe it was Bill Gates bought and wanted them to leave for the Hamas so they'll have agriculture and be able to feed themselves. But they didn't want anything from the Jews. But they took their land, and they've now been attacking, digging tunnels for the whole time. There has never been a time where they've not been at war with Israel. And if they leave Hamas in power in any form, they will rise up and strike again. And I've even wondered where the young people last week that were demonstrating, telling them to get out, was not just a stage to say a possibility of peace is coming with the younger generation. But you know, having seen many films where kids are indoctrinated from the time they can speak, I can't see how they escape. But I hope they have, but because Israel's going to either have to finish the job or it's always going to be a problem. But then you've got another problem on the West Bank that's just as big, and up north.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, I'm going to go back to you. The hostage crisis. Obviously, there's a public backlash against against Netanyahu, even at home. You still have 59 captives, 24 are presumed to be alive, hopefully more. They won't release them. Hamas won't release them. And by this expansion in Gaza militarily, many Jews, including obviously families and obviously supporters of getting the hostages home, I think every one of them would be supportive of that, are critical of Netanyahu, saying, you shouldn't do this. Let's get them back. Let's use diplomacy. This is another problem at home now.
Think of a kidnapped victim. Somebody's kidnapped. Okay. Now, objectively, somebody would say, if you pay the ransom, okay, they're going to kidnap somebody else. We should not pay ransom. But if you're the family of the victim,
Yeah.
it's an impossible situation. I cannot blame these families. If it was, God forbid, one of my relatives or yours, what would we be saying? What would we be wanting? There's an objective truth and strategy, but there's a subjective reality. I cannot blame these people protesting. I can understand that, and while I do not agree with them, I do not blame them. If I were unfortunate enough to be in their situation, I might be behaving the same way. God bless them, and God help them, and God rescue the hostages. It is only the Lord who can do anything. Objectively, Netanyahu was right. But if it was your family or mine, what would we be saying? Again, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, and this is why it's a no-win no matter what Netanyahu does.
That's
It doesn't
right.
even matter what he tries to do. I mean, and I agree, Jacob. We talked about David Freeman last week, the former ambassador to Israel from the U.S. That the
Yes.
fact that Israel needs to be convincingly win a war, and having won a war, you can make a case in 67. 73 was sort of a weird ending to that because of the U.S. pressure, but 2005, 2008, 2000, even early 2000, the first Intifada, it never worked out. It never worked out because they left the job undone. They have to get this job done to get the terrorists out of there. But at the same time, they're even facing their own problems domestically with Netanyahu and the obviously the backlash from the supporters of getting the hostages back without a war using diplomacy. I don't think diplomacy has worked. That's my personal take.
This goes back.
Something has to be done.
What you're saying is true. It goes back to the words of Douglas MacArthur. There is no substitute for victory. They left Korea in a stalemate. Now Korea has nuclear weapons, and it's a threat to this day. A threat to this day because the war was left unwon by Truman. Eisenhower inherited it. There is no substitute. The Soviet Union never would have had to exist if they had listened to Churchill and Patton and people like this, who were not perfect men, but they understood the realities. There is no substitute for victory. Well, Israel is the same thing on a smaller scale. When you leave a war unwon and you try to have a negotiated settlement in the name of a peace, it will not be a true or lasting peace. There must be a decisive victory. Then you can negotiate.
Give me 10,000 sons today or 50,000 sons tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. It is just the corruption and stupidity of the legacy of Truman.
Yeah.
In Israel. It's just Trumanism in Israel.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, obviously, David, can this be balanced out militarily, getting the hostages and getting patience within the public to say we got this done of some kind of trust by or for the Netanyahu administration that we can get this done? Just give us more time.
Well, I do think they can destroy Hamas, but with getting the hostages, that's just a giant X that it's so hard to figure out if you can, because they're willing to give 5 hostages right now for a 50-day peace. And what they do is, when you give them peace, when you give them a respite, all they do is rearm. They just try to get themselves ready for the next war. And so, okay, you got 5 now, so that could go on for a year, because they're always going to we'll give you 5 dead bodies, 5 more dead bodies. And Israel, they love life, and they want to get the bodies back, and they want to so they can reunite families and they can have a burial and things like this, and have some form of closure. But Hamas doesn't want that. They don't care. So it's such a big X. I don't know if they can do it. They
Jacob,
could
how
pick
much?
one or the other, I think.
Yeah, Jacob, how much pressure is on Netanyahu, or would this put on Netanyahu to prioritize the negotiations over escalation?
First of all, the main pressure he's concerned with now is the domestic. He no longer has to deal with the treachery of Biden and Harris and Obama.
That's
So
good news.
that is one advantage he now has. It's the domestic problem. The domestic problem has 3 aspects. The first aspect was, even before the October 7th attacks, he was trying to rein in the Israeli judiciary as a political organ and make it a purely judicial one. That was the first thing. And he was being protested against by the Israeli left, who want the same as the progressive Democrats want the courts to be a political organ in America, or France, or Romania, or Germany. Take your pick. That's the first. So it was already an issue. He was under domestic pressure even before October 7th. Second, October 7th. Whether we like it or not, it happened on his watch, much the same as the Yom Kippur War happened on the watch of Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan. For Moshe Dayan to save his neck politically, he changed political parties. He actually did that. And they found the scapegoat in General David Lazar. I don't say David Lazar did not have some responsibility, but they made him the scapegoat and the patsy to take the whole blame for something that went all the way up to the top. It went up to Golda Meir and went up to Moshe Dayan. It happened on their watch. Well, October 7th happened on Bibi Netanyahu's watch. He just fired his chief of Shin Bet. Why? Well, again, they need to find scapegoats to save their necks politically. I'm not accusing him of treachery, but it is politics. There is a question. Because the hostages are being held, and because of the war and the rockets being fired at the environs of Tel Aviv and so forth, the culpability for what happened on October 7th has been put on the back shelf. When the war winds down, the question is going to be there. How did this happen without us detecting it or knowing it? Who was in charge? And it happened on the watch of Benjamin Netanyahu. I like him politically in many respects, but this is still the reality. That is his second pressure. How did this happen on your watch? His third pressure is the hostages and the plight of the families. So he's under tremendous domestic pressure for those 3 reasons.
So Jacob, he never comes out of it, really. No matter what he does, he's got to face that day.
It is a quagmire.
Yeah, it is. Jacob, tell me about Qatargate, this new controversy that's going on with 2 of his media advisors that were supposedly playing a role by being, corrupted by Qatar in this Qatargate, and being paid to sort of bring an influence of Qatari influence within the government.
This is not like Biden and Hunter Biden being paid off by the Chinese. It wasn't like that. And then Biden lying and saying he doesn't benefit from his son's business. It wasn't at the top. It wasn't Netanyahu being paid.
Right.
It wasn't like what happened with Biden, for which Biden has never been held accountable, or his son criminally prosecuted. Chinese reconnaissance balloons over strategic American air bases and stuff like this. When Biden is being paid off. I mean, that's what happened. It wasn't like that. It was the level of an underling. I would say that this has a parallel in what happened with those signal conversations in Washington.
Right.
It was not at the top, it was underlings. However, your political enemies and the left wing media will seize upon it and try to pin the rap and responsibility on the head honcho.
Yeah.
They want to go after the Rosh Hashanah, the prime minister or the president. They're trying to take something for which there is responsibility among underlings and pin it on the top guy. That's what's basically happening. These guys, these two guys should be criminally prosecuted. There's no doubt in my mind. They should be criminally prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Yeah, this is Jonathan Urich and Eli
Yes.
Feldenstein,
Yes.
who basically have been released to house arrest. They are suspects in getting a lot of money to corrupt and influence Israeli media through Qatar. So this is, of course, Al Jazeera is probably involved in this in some way, since they're the biggest culprits within Qatar. David Lister, could this undermine Netanyahu at a critical time, or is it just noise? Is it just noise to get people off the real subject?
It's certainly noise, and because like Jacob explained, the real big target is October 7th, and it's anything to just keep a distraction going.
Yeah, Jacob, I want to go to the what's going on in the north. So we talked about the south.
Yeah, so I can just interject very quickly.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Where you see people like Jamie Raskin and Schumer and Blumenthal and Wasserman Schultz and Steve Cohen and these left-wing progressivist American Jews will be in the party with anti-Zionists and anti-Semites. They'll be in the same party with the Squad, with Tlaib and Olmert and these Muslims who hate Israel and hate Jews. They'll be in political partnership with the enemies of the Jewish people and of Israel. Well, these two underling advisors are the Israeli equivalent. They're only looking out for their own interests. They don't care about Israel. They don't care about the Jewish people. That's how I look upon these two media advisors. They're like the Israeli equivalents of Jamie Raskins and Chuck Schumer's.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they're out of there. I'm glad they caught them, because anything Qatar's involved, and I've been serious about it, it's not good. Negotiations, which was
absolutely.
Why are they doing that? The attack on Egypt, verbally, by saying that they shouldn't be involved in negotiations, where they're at least trying to get the hostages free, to at least about Egypt. But Jacob, tell me about the north, because that's the other side of the coin, is not just Gaza, but what's going on in Syria and Lebanon with Hezbollah. Syria is definitely concerned because Israel has hit some targets in Damascus, which is interesting. But also there's a senior leader of Hamas killed in Lebanon as well. Yes. So go ahead and do that.
Prior to the Israelis taking out Sinwar and even taking out Nasrallah, some of the Hamas leadership relocated to Lebanon under the protection of Hezbollah and to Syria, okay? Some of them. The Israelis have pursued them and hunted them down there. Okay, and the same as they eliminated the leadership of Hezbollah, they're eliminating any leadership of Hamas who's either in Lebanon or Syria. The real issue, Marco, is not Lebanon and Syria. The real issue is Turkey. Turkey is controlling this puppet government in Syria, run by a terrorist who was put on a new suit and shaved. But he's the same as what he always was. He's controlled by the Erdogan regime in Turkey, and Turkey is in serious trouble economically and politically. The lira is going through the basement again. And I remember that it was 175,000 lira for a bottle of water once. So they issued a new currency, and it's going the same way it used to be. Erdogan has destroyed that country economically, but also he's played the religious card to consolidate political power. He's completely antithetical to the ideological foundation of post-Ottoman Turkey. Ataturk wanted Turkey to be like Japan, an Eastern country with a Western economy and government, and a separation between religion and state. He wanted it to be, okay, the religion is is Shintoism in Japan, and the culture is Eastern, and all that stuff, and we have geisha girls, and we have sumo wrestling and things like this. But we also want to be open to Western culture. We want Yaku, baseball, and we want to have Mickey Mouse. Okay, and we want to have a government that is a Western parliamentary democracy, and we want to have an industrialized capitalist economy, the way MacArthur reformed Japan after the Second World War. Okay, Ataturk had that idea before MacArthur to make Turkey like that. With Erdogan, you have a wholesale departure from the ideological foundations of the nation and the society, going in the direction that he's gone with the religion and with all the rest that goes with it. He's bad news for Turkey, and he's in trouble. So therefore, he has a hand in trying again to amplify external issues, Lebanon and particularly Syria, in order to take media attention, which he controls the media to a large degree, away from the domestic reaction to his failed policies and the corruption of his government. The real issue is not what's happening in Syria or what's happening in Lebanon. It's what's happening in Turkey and what is happening in Iran. Iran is pulling away from its support of Hezbollah, because there's not much left of it, pulling away from its support for Hamas, because there's not much left of it, and has begun to show the first signs of pulling away its support from the Houthis, because the Houthis are being clobbered by Mr. Trump and by the Israelis, but particularly by the Americans, and to a slight degree by the British.
Yeah.
Watch, it's really Iran and Turkey that are the issues. Syria and Lebanon are the stooges.
Yeah, let me go back to Turkey real quick, Jacob, before we jump into Iran. It's they're part of NATO. Turkey's part of NATO.
Another problem.
Yeah, 1952 is when they came in, which was the original thought of being a European type nation. The idea now in the scenario that some people have pointed out is Article 5, that if Turkey were to go into, let's say, Syria and defend Syria, and they get into it with Israel, which seems to be in proximity, nobody's seeing the problems in Turkey, noticing the problems that Erdogan is a very unpopular leader, and there's many protests right now to try to get him out of there because he imprisoned one of his political opponents. Article 5 of NATO, which is, of course, any NATO country that's attacked, they are to be they're to be backed by NATO. Jacob, just entertain my thought here. Could you see a scenario where Israel would be consider an aggressor against a NATO country?
No, I do not think Israel will attack Turkey. Whether Turkey would attack Israel, I could not 100% rule out him doing that. And in that case, Israel would respond. But that would not constitute a violation of Article 5. However, let's forget about Article 5, because Wesley Clark, Javier Solano, Bill Clinton, and Tony Blair acted in open defiance of Article 5 when they took sides in the former Yugoslavia against the Serbs on behalf of the Islamic Kosovo Liberation Army. So Article 5 has already been abrogated by Clinton and by Tony Blair and by Solano and by Wesley Clark when he was commander of NATO forces. So Article 5 is there, but it says they have to attack a country that attacks a NATO country. Right. I don't believe Israel is going to attack Turkey, but I do believe if Turkey attacks Israel, Israel would counterattack.
Right. So the scenario is that you could be at a crossroads with NATO, Israel, and obviously Turkey is part of NATO, in Syria. Not even in Israel, but in Syria.
We have to remember the thinking in Washington and in Brussels. Brussels, not the EU, but Brussels is where NATO headquarters is.
Yeah.
Is the Dardanelles, the Bosporus. That's the problem. Turkey controls access to the Black Sea. Turkey can easily close down all access to the Black Sea, to the detriment of Russia or to the detriment of NATO. They have the West by the throat because they control the Dardanelles and the Bosporus. They control the channel between the Mediterranean, the Aegean Mediterranean, and the Black Sea. That is why the West is so vulnerable to Turkey.
Right. And also,
So
go
you've
ahead.
got a lot of hatred in Greece against Turkey. Let's remember, Constantinople was Greek originally.
Yeah.
Harem, the Asian side of Istanbul, was Turkish. But Topkapi, what Topkapi is, and Constantinople, that was on the European side of the Bosporus. Also, the city of Izmir, the biblical city of Smyrna, that area was Greek, and it was
Yeah.
grabbed by the Turks. It was
Yeah.
grabbed by the Turks. For this reason, the Turks have been kept out of any possibility of joining the EU because Greece would veto it. The other thing that happened is, although only 15% of the Cypriot population is Turkish Cypriots, 85% are Greek Cypriots. Turkey invaded and took 40% of the territory of Cyprus.
Yes.
And Kissinger did nothing about it. Again, what could he do? They needed Turkey. This was when the Cold War was going on, and they needed Turkey because of the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. So that's the situation.
Yeah, Turkey also controls and they've threatened Europe, and they've been very successful at it, of allowing rampant Muslim immigration into Europe.
Rampant.
Yeah, and so that's the other concern, right, with Turkey.
Not only that, they were doing it for purposes not only of political but financial blackmail.
Yeah, this is why Greece, Bulgaria, Hungary, all those countries on the eastern side did not want Turkey in the EU, and they protested. Which Turkey didn't care, because they said, look, if you don't do what we tell you to do, like you said, by the throat.
But let's remember, going back to the 16th century, when the Turks tried to invade Central Europe, they were stopped by the Poles, the Polish under King Jan Sobieski in Vienna. The Ukrainians, the Lithuanians, particularly the Polish, who basically saved Europe at that time, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, they all fought the Turks. Now, not reconstituted post-Ottoman Turkey, it was old Turkey.
Yeah.
But they fought the Turks.
Yeah.
And memories run very long. The Turks are traditional enemies of the Balkans and of Eastern Europeans. Yep. The Polish fought them to a standstill. Otherwise, they would have overrun Austria and Bavaria and Galicia and a lot of other places in Central Europe.
Yeah, let's talk about Iran real quick, Jacob, because you brought it up earlier. The support of Hezbollah, which we're running into September 17th, 2024, Pagergate, what they call Pagergate, where Hezbollah was decimated after the pager. The Israelis blew up their pagers. They've never been the same since. Hamas, well, we talked about that already. The Houthis, which has been basically suffered tremendous casualties with the terrorist organization that they are because of the airstrikes by the U.S. Iran's pulling away. Is this a signal that they're willing to come to some diplomatic agreement, Jacob, or are they just concerned about the B-2 bombers not too far from them?
It is a combination of things. What troubles the mullahs the most is keeping power. Remember, there is a growing dissident movement in Iran that has always been there. When it first emerged during the Obama administration, Obama took the side of the Iranian terrorist regime. Obama has always been a friend of Iranian terror, as was Biden. He did nothing. But the movement has always been there. There's even people wanting to bring back the son of the Shah, Mr. Pahlavi, who lives in Connecticut, and with his family. This was a peacock throne going back to Cyrus the Great. So the claim is. They're afraid of their politically precarious position. Remember, it is mainly uneducated Muslims in places like North Tehran who are in Tehran who support the mullahs. It's mainly the uneducated who support the mullahs. The more educated are less likely to be supportive of the mullahs. The other thing is Iran has a relationship with Russia that is economically motivated and a relationship with China. Iran is supplying China. Iran is the largest source of oil now for China.
Yeah.
China is wanting to build, with its Belt and Road Initiative, pipelines, roads, and railroads that will connect a port in on the Black Sea with not Armenia but Georgia, the area around Georgia, and and go all the way to the Caspian, have a ferry service across the Caspian, and then connect with railroads, pipelines, and a road system that will go all the way into China. Bearing in mind that China has a 53 or 54-mile common border with Afghanistan. So China is making plays in the Muslim world, in Afghanistan and in Iran, and if they could, Kazakhstan. China's problem is it is carrying out pogroms against Muslims with the Uyghurs. That's its problem. But business is business. Iran is the same thing. Iran knows very well what happened in Russia and what Putin did to the Muslims in Russia. Okay? He knows very well what happened to the Muslims in Russia, that Putin genocidally massacred them. But business is business. They're willing to pretend that didn't happen for the sake of preserving power. And power requires money, and money requires power. So Iran's lifelines are its relationship with Russia and China. That's its lifelines. It has lost too much power and influence in the other Muslim countries, which are Arab and don't like Persians anyway. Partial exception of Qatar.
Yeah.
Qatar.
Yeah. They'll make a deal with anybody. David Lister, do you think this is going to be a diplomatic agreement, or the pressure from Trump with the B-2 bombers and Diego Garcia would just be enough to deter them not to go into a head-to-head with Israel or the U.S.?
Well, they're pushing things up to what we railroaders call up to the bumping post. They're getting to a place where they have no room to maneuver. And, you know, and I'm wondering if Trump would actually use those, or whether he would use those are a distraction so that Israel can take care of the problem.
Yeah.
So it's a bad chess game, and it's going to be hard because, look, the Sunnis hate Iran. They're enemies of him, would like to see him destroyed. America would like to see them. They're a cancer on the whole world because they always use terrorists. But would China and Russia come in if anybody does attack them is a big question. Will they come in to support them because they're all buying oil? But could you stop Iran if you just took out the island with all the oil?
Hog Island would probably hurt at least a third of the oil export capacity.
Yeah, we hit them, and then also we don't have to hit their nuclear plants if we take out all their power stations, which has been one plan. They've got about 15, 20 power stations that could bring make the whole country dark. So there's a lot of possibilities in everything, and can we get out of it without a nuclear war would be a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jacob, before we switched over from Israel, Middle East, Iran, and what's going on in with Hezbollah and Hamas, I wanted to ask you if you can tie it in biblically of what we're looking at. The stress of nations come to mind. The stress of nations throughout the world, it's for sure, and wars and rumors of war. But what do you see biblically right now, especially when you have Damascus involved, Iran involved, Israel involved? other Western powers involved, but the distress of nations for sure is something that I see from Luke 21.
Absolutely. There'll be fear and anxiety among the nations, none of them knowing the way out. But this is certainly epicentric for the Middle East, but it is global in its ramification. Secondly, biblically, I looked at Daniel 2. The prince of Greece is coming. He's in conflict with the prince of Persia, which is Iran, but the prince of Greece is coming. This conflict between Greece and which represented at that time Europe was Greece. Okay,
European,
Europe was Greece at that time. Yavan in Hebrew. The conflict between Europe and Iran and Persia. That is what I would see as being the most biblically pointed aspect of the conflict that we are presently seeing.
Yeah, and definitely somebody like Trump who's coming in and just sort of not necessarily disrupt things, but he's definitely disrupting things from the Muslim perspective. He's not liked, he's not loved, he's not cared for because he's taken the side of Israel. And so there is that side of somebody negotiating and trying to bring some kind of agreement. Obviously, I don't believe Trump is the Antichrist in any way, but this call for peace, this call for trying to bring some kind of unity in that area. Is that something you see that it's foreshadowing?
The Antichrist will bring a false peace to the Middle East. That is for sure.
Yeah.
The world will come to an apocalyptic juncture, and the Antichrist will be the one who will, among other things, bring this false peace, and con both the Jews and the Muslim world, as he will con Europe to hold the iron together with the clay, with the weak countries of Europe, with the strong ones. Absolutely, the Antichrist is putting his boots on. He's getting. If he, I don't know if he's alive, but sometimes I'd be very surprised if he wasn't.
Yeah.
Marco, could Trump be like this disruptor to these evil Muslim nations and giving his people a respite, giving us a respite for a time to get ready?
Yes.
It's a disruptor that has pushed back their plans, which he did the same thing in with the Abraham Accords. He's messed them up. They
That
were.
is a good point, David. That is a good point. On one hand, he may be God's agent to give the West and give
Yeah.
America, Christianized West, a respite, and to give Israel a respite. On the other hand, the Abraham Accords, that has Antichrist written all over it.
Of
Yeah.
course. But it started bringing this peace. It was,
False peace, yes.
false peace. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Jacob, Jeremiah 49, the destruction and judgment of Elam, which is obviously modern Iran in the south. Do you see that having in any way militarily, some of the threats that are going on that, Iran doesn't abandon its nuclear program? There might be definitely some attacks onto that nation.
Okay, the Straits of Hormuz are very narrow at that particular point. Oman is there, Saudi Arabia is there on one side, and Iran is there on the other. The Emirates are up a bit, but the Straits of Hormuz are a chokehold, like the Dardanelles, like the Bosporus. They're a chokehold. Okay, they're a chokehold. So absolutely, I can see the conflict with Iran being ignited around the Straits of Hormuz, around the area of ancient Elam. Absolutely. But the other thing is that is the main oil production area on both sides of the Gulf.
It's strategically placed, and God knows what he's talking about.
And also the Shia minority in Saudi Arabia, who are disliked and distrusted by the Sunni majority, live in the area of Saudi Arabia on the Straits of Hormuz, opposite Elam, biblical Elam. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Jeremiah 49 for those who want to read more about that. Jake, I'm going to switch gears to the economy, and this is encompassing a global economy. This is a global, what they call it, a tariff war, and this is what economies have been going into a frenzy and a fear is over the tariff that Donald Trump has instituted back on Wednesday. We call it Liberation Day. Now, tariffs are not something unique or something new. Obviously, we've had here in the States the Morrill tariff back in 1861, and you got the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in 1930, which we people have, if you studied up on it, this is something not new, but nonetheless, reciprocal tariffs, though, is what Trump has been calling for, and that the fact that the U.S. had been ripped off for many years now, he's bringing back some tariffs and some. It's not to the degree that other tariffs are put on the United States goods, but this is some tariffs to sort of bring some balance to it. Your thoughts on this, because it's all over the place. The market's acting up. The world's going crazy, calling Trump a disruptor, and he's going to destroy the economy. And obviously, the U.S. Democrats are going crazy as well. But your thoughts?
Okay. Initially, there would be three things that need to be taken into consideration internationally before we look at the domestic. Internationally, the hedge fund managers, 90% of them are Democrats, are anti-Trump, okay? They have tremendous power. Companies like State Street and BlackRock, they're beyond holding companies. You're talking $10 trillion of assets under management just by BlackRock alone. Most of these companies are governed by people or under the control of executives who are Democrats and who are pro-progressivist, not because of their quest for social justice, but because they know how to use that to advance their own interests. That's the first. They're elitist and globalist. That's the first. So they're making a big deal out of it. It's going to cause this, going to cause that. It's politically driven to make war against Trump and his policies and his popularity. That is the first thing. Secondly, these governments and countries that have been ripping off the American consumer and taxpayer for so long obviously don't like it. What, you're not going to let us rip you off anymore? What? I mean, if we tax you at 25%, you're going to tax us at 25% equitably? That's not fair. We should be able to rip you off. You can't rip. This will come to an end. These governments and these countries obviously will not like this. The third is simply market psychology, the Dow, the TI. Investors come in two forms. There's strategic investors who take a long view, and there are speculators and short-term investors who take a short view. Those taking a short view will only see the short-term ramifications of the tariff wars. They won't look at any long-term potential advantages of it. So it's just the markets are going to react volatilely. If there's a war happens in the Middle East, the price of oil is going to go up, but it can go down just as quickly a week after that. It's a short-term investors have a lot of influence on whether a stock market goes up, equities markets go up or down. That is true of the NASDAQ, that is true of the TI, that is true of the Dow, that is true of all of them. The DAX is true of all of them. Okay. On the Hang Seng, it's true of all of them. Okay. So there's those three factors. Now let's take a look at the longer view. If somebody will not be able to buy something cheaper manufactured in China or elsewhere, and they're going to have to buy one manufactured in the United States, it's going to raise the price of it. I'm going to pay more again for a stereo. I'm going to pay more for a microwave oven. I'm going to pay more for these things. But when you pay more for certain things, there's less disposable income to buy other things. So that will push other prices down in a market economy. Secondly, when the tariffs begin to produce revenue for government, this funds the tax cuts that Trump wants on overtime, on tips, and all these other things. Social Security, okay. So people are gaining income by reduced taxes. They don't talk about that. They only talk about the short-term inflationary effects. Okay. Thirdly, your domestic employment situation increases substantially, particularly for blue-collar workers and revitalization of the Rust Belt, the states around the Great Lakes, where the Democrats have had a stronghold, but Trump has been breaking them or trying to break them with some success politically. Okay? When that happens, you've had just March an incredible growth. 228,000 jobs. And these are not all low paid service jobs or government jobs like you had with Biden and Obama. These are actual jobs. And April is likely to be higher. So already you've got these other industrial economies like Japan saying we have to build in America now. These jobs are coming back. This will break the power of the Democratic Party in the Rust Belt, in the Great Lakes states of the upper Midwest. This is what the Democrats are frantically afraid of. So they have to scream inflation, scream trade war, it's going to hurt everything. They want you to look at the short term to take your eyes off the long term. Only the long term is not that long. Already, these other economies are realizing they're going to have to build in America, that jobs are going to be repatriated here. Now, there's one other thing I would point out. China is going to put a 34% tariff on all American, except for commodities you don't have. Necessary mineral commodities that you need industrially that you don't have, except for those things, or you don't have an adequate supply, reserves. Except for those things, in any trade war, the country with the trade deficit has the advantage. The United States automatically has the advantage because it has a trade deficit with China. America is in the strong place. It's the country that has the trade surplus with America that is vulnerable. 34%, it wouldn't matter if it was 54%. The country that has the trade deficit has the advantage in a trade war. But don't expect CBS, NBC, BBC, or the Clinton News Network or any of these things, or the New York Slimes or the Washington Compost to tell you that. But that's the reality.
Yeah. Yeah, David, I'm going to go to you real quick. The reciprocal tariffs. Obviously, people call it fairness. Some people call it global chaos, which is, of course, a lot of it is hoax. But in the short term, as Jacob was talking about, obviously people look at this and think, oh, my God, the stock market's going down. But in the long term, and this is what Trump administration has been saying, it protects U.S. jobs. It's a fair trade. It boosts revenue, which you were talking about that. Trump is talking about abolishing the IRS in order to replace it with tariffs. And most people that look at this stuff says it could work. It could definitely work. But your thoughts on that particular part of it? Is it a fairness or is it chaos?
See, for me, I don't know that it's really fair. I see reciprocal trades as more along the lines of let's make a deal, okay? Because the way he seems to have done this is that he takes America trade deficit with other nations, and those nations trade surplus with us, and then divide them in half, proclaiming these people, since they're making half, you've been charging us, and so we want that back. And so the assumption that this method is a trade surplus means that you have to believe that that country is taking advantage of us. Madagascar, a couple, 3 million people, gets a 47% trade, reciprocal trade thing. But they don't have enough to be taking advantage of our economy that would even hit on the radar screen. But I think Trump is really trying to to get people like Israel, let's just Vietnam, 0-0. Okay, that's a fair trade. Okay, but we have to assume that everybody's taking advantage of us, overcharging it. Look, China does have a surplus with us, but they also have to import raw materials, okay, and bring those in to manufacture these goods. And so you have to ask, are they really overcharging us? Do you know what I mean? And taking advantage of us, or is it our own consumerism? And so, so yes, it's really. It doesn't necessarily mean they've been overcharging us. I think there's something else here. I really think he wants to tell people this and get better deals. And I think that's we need to go back to tariffs that are reasonable, like some of the other ones in the past years. This reciprocal, I think, is very much different than other tariffs. And then because now you think about Canada, okay, their population is pretty small, right? Okay. And that's a variable. There's less demand overall for our goods. They're never going to be able to be balanced with them because they're smaller than us and their dollar is worth less. And so while Canada has relied upon U.S. for a bunch of imports, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're subsidizing Canada. A trade deficit is not a subsidy. The U.S. pays for Canadian goods, and they pay in what? American dollars. And what does Canada do with those dollars? They buy our treasuries. They invest in us. And so that's generally how global trade works. But to me, I think he's looking for better deal. Vietnam wants to do a 0-0 trade.
Right.
Argentina wants to do 0-0 trade. That would be free trade. That's where it should all go. But you have to assume that everybody that's trading with us with reciprocal trades is taking advantage of us. Yeah, and it's because we've been stupid. Our politicians have been stupid. And so, look, that's a little bit different what everybody else is saying, but global trade is so interconnected that
Yes.
I can't see that Madagascar is taking advantage of us. I just don't get it, and some of the other small places.
What David says is in part true, and it's without doubt Donald Trump is using this to bring people to a negotiating table.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
David is absolutely correct. Donald Trump is forcing this crisis to bring people to a negotiating table to get a better deal for America. Also, China has to buy these minerals from Australia and countries like this. That is also true. However, that does not matter. It still comes down to the equation is whoever has the trade deficit has the automatic advantage in a trade war. It doesn't matter if China's ripping you off or not.
Right, but he wants
you have the surplus. That works to your advantage in a trade war.
That is absolutely true, Jacob. I believe that. But that's why, since he has the cards, that's the game he wants to play and try to get the best we can out of it. And I like what you said about BlackRock and all these Democrats running these funds. And you have to understand, the stupid reporters say, oh, $3 trillion was wiped off the books. It was wiped off of someone's books, but the people betting down, like maybe BlackRock themselves, were shorting stocks and everything else, and that money has to go somewhere. That $3 trillion just didn't disappear into the.
That BlackRock and Goldman Sachs and these companies were absolutely shorting. I guarantee you.
And that's where it went from one person's pocket into another person's pocket. I had a couple friends that ran some options. They did quite well. Yeah. So and look, one company of the top 7 of all this money was supposedly worth $1 trillion. People have been saying the video has been oversold, and the top 7 have been oversold because we're not hooking the worth of companies to their real value. They just do a profit to earning, and it's a mythological number, sort of like
That's
finding
right.
a unicorn, and it's not really true. So,
That's
they're
right.
oversold, and this is the product of that, of this money being wiped off. I pulled all my money out 3 weeks ago because I saw it
Right,
coming.
there's the disconnect between book value and the Dow.
That's
Absolutely.
right. That's right.
Yeah. Jacob, real quick, the retaliation from world leaders. Now, it's a mixed bag. Some are saying we'll retaliate. Some, even like Mark Carney says, well, the U.S. is our largest partner, so we're going to have to, play ball with them. That's different than what he's been saying before, but definitely Ursula von der Leyen and EU, obviously China with Xi Jinping, are promising retaliation against the U.S. Will this, in the short term, be painful?
It'll be painful, but not as painful for America as it's going to be for Europe and China.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Europe.
Exactly. Yeah. The global recession fears. People are saying recession, depression. Is this hoax?
Don't forget, even India is in somewhat trouble, and China is in major trouble.
Big
Russia
trouble,
is in
Jacob.
trouble. Much of the world is already in recession. Germany, the third biggest economy, has been in recession for 4 years. There's going to be a recession. There's already a recession in most of the world. Most of the other industrial powers, the big ones, Germany, China, Japan, are all in trouble anyway.
The world is talking about the economy, Jacob, and it's involving just about every nation, every industrialized nation for sure. It's just prophetic in some way, prophetically, that now all of a sudden you're in the situation where you're realizing every economy is tied together. Even the average person is going like, wait a minute,
Interconnected.
what is this? Why are we going through this economic systems?
One thing we see is Donald Trump somehow realizes, either by divine inspiration or something else, that globalism is a threat to sovereignty and democracy.
Yes.
And he is, to a degree, disentangling the United States from the globalist agenda, from the Schwab Slobs and people like that. That's what he's doing. From Stavos and what's it? In Switzerland.
World Economic Forum.
And World Economic Forum, but it's really stuff in Switzerland.
Davos, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. He's disentangling from a degree. But notice two other things are happening. Donald Trump is just today pressured Powell, the Fed, to lower interest rates.
Yes.
Don't worry about the inflation. Inflation is caused by government, not by market fluctuations caused by tariffs and trade wars. He's trying to get the Fed to do that. But he's also fired the commander and the civilian deputy director of the NSA. Is Trump beginning to make war on the real establishment, the two unelected, unconstitutional, anti-democratic branches of government, the deep state and the Fed? The deep state really controls foreign and defense policies more than the Defense Department, more than the Pentagon, and more than the State Department. Deep state controls it. Second, more than the others. Secondly, it's not the Treasury Department or the Commerce Department. It is the Federal Reserve, completely unconstitutional, unelected branch of government. Can Donald Trump make war, force the Fed, force the deep state to clean up their act and to become accountable? That is the real question. If he did that, he'd be the greatest president in history. If he could do that, he would be the greatest president in history. If you can rein in the deep state, really rein it in, as Kennedy wanted to do but failed, and if you could rein in the Fed, hopefully abolish it and replace it with the Bank of the United States or something that would not be like it.
Nationalize it.
That's right. Hopefully he can do that. If by some miracle of God he manages to do it, he would. They should put him on Mount Rushmore with Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson and Teddy Roosevelt. They should put him
Well,
on.
with his ego, they'd have to take the others down and put his up there.
I was about.
But that cutting out the money there, Jacob, for the Fed is, I'd like to see it doged, have it all audited and everything. It's just a bunch of private guys that got together and made a national bank, and they're responsible for our recessions, they're responsible for our depression and everything else. And they, no one elected to do this.
And most of them are international bankers.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is there's about $4 trillion coming into the U.S. economy by next year. This is from Japan, Europe, and this is investment. This is secured investment by next year, $4 trillion. And to build here, to manufacture here, to, obviously for consumer goods and all that. I think if he pulls that off, if what he's able to do here, pass the bills in Congress, reining the Federal Reserve. Jacobs talked about the guy that he fired, General. I think his name was General Hugh from the NSA director, right?
H-A-U-G.
Yeah, the agent and
I think we'll be sitting much different next year than this. And you're right. I think he'll probably do something that's hasn't been done in 100 years, since McKinley, who wanted to change a lot of that and back the dollar by gold and all that stuff. So it will be a major maneuver. But my thought is the world's thinking about the economy now. The world's thinking, how is this going to affect me? Where the nations are going to go when the reality comes that their economy is not that good. And Europe realizes we're in deep, the average person, meaning it's not that good. And this is sort of bringing up to the surface what has been transpiring over the past few years. So
but Europe's paying for all those Muslims. What is it? 93% are on welfare or something like that.
Great point, Jacob. I mean, David, about Islam in Europe. I want to talk about that real quick. Jacob, you brought up Le Pen on earlier on. I think it was in your hot take. Le Pen's been banned from the 2027 election at this point. We'll see what happens, but at least for now, 4 years in prison, 2 years of those in house arrest for corruption charges. Really, a minor financial breach in terms of
alleged financial breach.
Right. In comparison to what these other French guys have done, including
nothing happened to them. It's all politically driven.
Yeah. The former president before that, Sarkozy, had even more than that. She was a leading vote getter. And of course, now Europe seems to be copying the left here in America, the lawfare. They're going after her the way Alvin Bragg, Fannie Willis, all these people went after Trump. Is it going to work, Jacob, since you don't have a Supreme Court like they have here? There's no, the EU is it.
Well, let's remember, they tried to make the ICC their Supreme Court.
Obviously, The Hague doesn't work.
There is a European Court of Justice in Strasbourg, but again, that was a political, not a judicial agency.
Correct. Is it going to work?
In the United States, it only fueled support for Trump,
right?
Much to the frustration of the left. The initial signs in France, and France is different than America. I was just in France yesterday. I was in Dunkirk yesterday. France is different than the United States, but it is already invigorated French support for Le Pen.
You mean it could backfire? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, already beginning to backfire. How far it'll go, that is the question.
Well, they got to Geert Wilders for in Dutch and in Netherlands a while ago, and now he's back somewhat. They don't really support him really much. But the case studies that I wanted to talk about, Jacob, is what happened in Romania, where Georgescu, Carlin Georgescu, who won the preliminary votes. And he was a lead, almost unknown figure, but came out and he was a conservative. Obviously, they paint them as far right, but he's a conservative. And he doesn't want war. He doesn't want rampant immigration. He doesn't even like much of what the unelected EU wants to do. But he's a conservative, and they banned him from the ballot, basically calling him a Putin lover and a sympathizer to Russia. Then there's the AfD in Germany, 21% of the vote. largest increase of any party. They could have made some headways in Germany, but they were not allowed to even be making alliance with any party in the
Oh,
party.
it's going to be the same. The Christian Democrats making alliances with left-wing parties and having an unworkable German government that cannot do what needs to be done to resurrect the German economy, which continues to disintegrate.
Correct. And they had 152 seats in parliament, so they can't even do anything. So, Jacob, my thought is this. What are we looking at here? Europe is just locking down in a totalitarian way, can't even vote anymore.
Judicial fascism in Europe is what is happening in the United States, but to a stronger degree. Okay? Remember, the United States has a constitution. Europe, those countries in Europe don't, and the EU constitution is politically interpreted. Again, we can only thank God for the founding fathers. Not perfect men, but they understood human nature and they understood the corruption of government, particularly Thomas Jefferson. He wasn't perfect, but he certainly understood that. Europe is in a much more precarious state than the United States because judicial fascism is more institutionalized in Europe than it is in the States.
Right. We talked about populism here, Jacob, and you've seen the rise of populism and of course, conservative parties. They're obviously under fire. Is it a warning for all populists?
Same as they called when Trump had that rally during the election in Madison Square Garden, and the bimbos of the spew were saying it was a Nazi rally, or comparing it to a Nazi rally, or something like that. Well, the Irish Patriots, the Reform Party in England, Le Pen's people, the ADF in Germany, they're calling them all Nazis. It's just the rhetoric that the mainstream media and the liberal academic establishment uses. You just call them Nazis. And just keep saying Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. The way that American blacks and American liberals have been conditioned to just yell racist, 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 even when there's no racism, just keep saying it. It's just Goebbels. It's just Goebbels. The nations that fought the Nazis have become Nazis. They're the real Nazis.
Is it a warning to other populist movements? Don't do this, or we'll come.
They're trying to send that signal.
Yeah, yeah.
They tried it in America with Donald Trump, and they failed.
Right. Yeah. It's
going to fail in Europe. That's what it comes to.
So Europe has the iron fist. America has the circus, right? It was the circus. We got the iron fist. Jacob, how do you see it play out? I mean, is going to populism rise up to the point where they could overthrow this, or does the iron fist ultimately clamps down on this?
Ultimately, we know, Daniel, the iron doesn't stick to the clay, and they're going to look for somebody who can make that happen. Will there be periods of respite? That is the question.
Right,
Just
right.
like things. Will there be periods of respite? That's the question. But ultimately, we know what it's going to come to.
Sticking with Europe, because Europe has the other side of the problem, and this is where it gets entangled with the populism. There is another side of Europe that it's increasing, and that is the Islam. And
What Bush and Obama, and well, particularly George Bush and Obama, tried to do, sell America down the river to Islam. That has gone a lot further in Europe with people like Starmer and that terrible woman in Germany. She basically seemed like she was trying to destroy the country. Angela Merkel. Starmer and Merkel, these people have tried to destroy Europe. The way that Obama and Bush tried to destroy America, selling it down the river to Islam after September 11th. Again, America's got a bad situation, but Europe is worse.
Right, right. Let me give you some information here about the UK, and obviously you're well aware of this. But for those who don't know, it's the Muslim invasion of the UK, from mayors from London to Birmingham to Leeds to obviously Oxford, and all these claiming to be Muslims. Right. This is a legitimate thing, and you have 4 million population in the UK, which is a question of how far they've gotten with only 4 million out of the 66 million. 300 mosques, Sharia courts, Sharia councils. Muslim women don't work. Muslim men who receive support and free housing, and on and on. And every school has to teach
Yeah.
something about Islam. And
British worker has to be overly taxed to pay to the welfare of Muslims. But
Right.
Muslims, the Islamic leadership, sees this as the demitude.
Right, the tax.
They'll has to pay a penalty tax to the Muslim because they're not Muslims.
Right.
That's how they see the welfare state. This is Allah causing the infidel to have to support us.
Right.
This is
Right.
demitude. This is the jizra. This is how they see it. And of course, you have people, the same as you have people like Cheney and Bush and Obama. And on the side of the Muslims in America, you have Starmer and Merkel and people like that on the side of the Muslims in Europe.
Yeah, no doubt. And plus, the UK, within the UK, you have the free speech thing that has been plaguing, from Starmer days, even before then. You have toddlers, 3 to 4 year olds, who are being called transphobic and accused of
calling a 3-year-old transphobic,
kicking him out of school, out of this nursery, and claiming that by kicking the kid out of there, the staff will feel safe. The staff will be a lot safer by not having the kid there. You have the couple that you mentioned, I think early on, Jacob, about the WhatsApp chat, complaining about schools and then being visited by the police and being arrested in Bourneham Wood. This is going on in the UK, France, Sweden, Norway.
Yeah. Remember, the Starmer government is actively on their side.
Right.
At least in Denmark and to a degree in Sweden, there's a reaction to this.
Yeah. Too late. Perhaps too late.
Yeah.
Perhaps too late. But in America,
it's the people in Hungary and Poland who are standing up.
Yeah, it's the Eastern European nations. Yeah. You have things like just comparing it to what Texas is going through with that big mosque and civic center that they're trying to build in I think in Plano? Yeah, in Plano, Texas, in which the government in Texas, the governor is trying to fight against it and not allowing to this a proposed community. It's a huge community. Well, they've done that in the UK, haven't they?
Well, they should name it after George Bush. Because he and Cheney have done everything they can to betray America to the interests of the Saudi Arabians and Islam.
You mean Sheikh Bush?
Yeah.
That's a new,
Marco.
Obama's had the Bush administration in their back pocket.
I see one big difference between us and Europe, that a lot of Americans really believe in America. This nationalism, we call it populism. We really believe it. But over there, Europe is so divided, and it's 10 toes. They can't get along with each other, and then they put an unelected bureaucracy that has no loyalty to any of them in charge, and now they're reaping.
Oh, 100%.
Understand the way they did that, David. The way they did that was the EU was an institution that grew out of the Second World War. Okay. After the Marshall Plan, the Americans rebuilt the basic infrastructure, but now for Europe to redevelop economically, they formed the common market. But it came out of the Second World War, and they saw what Hitler did in Germany and what Mussolini did in Italy, and that was what they identified as nationalism. You understand? Right. So there was an effort to destroy nationalism in reaction to what happened with the Third Reich.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
That's how they sold it.
Paradigm. It's a crazy paradigm that they see it. So they see America as a president that's nationalist, more nationalist than anything else, and then they see them as a Nazi, which is part and parcel of what we see.
They blinded themselves so bad, they're becoming what they say started off fighting against.
That's right.
They're becoming the Mussolinis and the Hitlers.
They're the Nazis.
I wonder if they'll end up that way.
Well, if Islam becomes the ruling force,
can you imagine that would be so crazy? They become the basically the enforcers They become
Yep.
the enforcers of the policies of the Labor government. That would be unbelievably
Yeah.
crazy. The unbelievably nuts. With Jacob, leads me to the next point about the persecution in the UK, which had started. We've seen it. We've talked about it, the prayer groups and things like that. But here's a labor-run council, right? That is in Aldershot, that it is consulting, obviously, with the Labor government to propose these crazy laws that would basically prohibit Christian preaching, Christian praying, Christian singing. You couldn't pray over somebody, laid hands on them, even if they wanted to be prayed over. And this is, of course, if they breach these laws, these council laws that are coming in, that you could face up to 2 years in prison. And this is
But
in
you can't
Rushmore.
do this to the large Buddhist community in Aldershot,
Yeah,
which is very cool. Anyway, I'm in Aldershot all the time. I know it very well. Okay,
that's
I've
not too
been.
far, right? It's not too far from London, not too far from where the areas you've
But
been.
it's the headquarters of the British Army.
Man,
You have a large Hindu and Buddhist community because of the Gurkha families, the Gurkha soldiers in the British Army, and there are Muslims. But again, it's labor.
yeah,
I knew an evangelist who went to the same church as me, who preached the gospel faithfully in front of a shopping mall in Aldershot. He's now with the Lord. If he was here, he'd be in jail. I mean, if he was still there, he'd be in jail. I mean, they've done this repeated, but they will never do it to Muslim preachers, and they'll never do it to homosexual activists. Only Christians.
yeah. So these group of street preachers are basically taking taking on the Christian Legal Center as the defendants and saying this needs to stop. We can't have this. And so the Christian Legal Center is proposing, challenging these laws which are coming on because the labor-run Rushmore Council. What do you got there, Jacob?
I got a letter from the Christian Institute today, and
Amen.
I contribute to them. I'm not right to know what the left hand is doing, but I contribute regularly
I
to
would
their.
put your address out there for everyone to see there, Jacob.
Now, please don't do
Please
that.
go online to the Christian Institute. They need our prayers and support,
That's right.
even if you're not British. Britain is the cradle of democracy, of Western English-speaking democracy, of Protestant democracy, and it is under attack. Islam believes if they can get England, they can get the Western world. They've said that.
That's the thought.
Please pray for the Christian Institute. Please, if you're able to, support them financially. I do, and I urge everyone else to. They are good brethren in Christ, and they're fighting for the rights and freedom of the body of Christ. There's more to Britain than Britain. Britain has a seminal influence on the development of democracy in the Western world, particularly in the English-speaking countries. Please pray for the Christian Institute and support it.
Yeah, let me tell you a little about the street preachers that are bringing this challenge against this law, because what they're trying to say is an injunction without, an injunction against these laws that would basically criminalize. This is what they would criminalize any preacher, right? Because we're in a pluralistic society. So if you live in a environment where there's a lot of different faith, you would be considered disrupting what they call disrupting the non-inclusive environment. So you have to be able to be inclusive to all these, right? So another thing that they will try to keep is prayer. You can't pray for anybody. Silencing the gospel, singing worship songs. We've known, Jacob, already. People have been jailed for praying in silence in their head. So this will actually continue and expand some of these already terrible laws that have been found in the UK against Christians. Davey, what do you got? Go ahead, jump in.
Well, one thing too, look, they want to stop you from being able to hand out Bible tracts, pray for people even if they want it, and stop you from handing out Bibles. I just really wanted to reiterate what Jacob said. We need to pray for the Christian Institute, get involved. We've got a situation here with Billboard Chris at the moment, who's suing the Australian government for taking the East Safety Commissioner to task here. This will be a test here too. What the outcome of this will be will determine our freedoms here. But look, don't think they're going to stop you from just being, if they pass this and you're not allowed to hand out Bibles to people, the next step will be, okay, you won't be able to have a Bible in your home because it'll be classed as hate speech.
Yeah.
You will not be able to.
That's right.
And this is a warning for us too. We need to heed learn the lesson from the underground church and that in China. We need to get God's word into us. We need to treasure his word in our hearts because the day may be coming, and it may be coming soon, where we're not going to be able to have the luxury of having God's word in our hands or in our homes. We're going to have to treasure it in our hearts. So get it into you while you can. But I do pray for people here. Keep Billboard Chris in prayer. Pray for a good outcome. With this lawsuit, it's unprecedented. I guess taking the Australian government to task, suing them, and get behind the Christian Institute. That's it.
Yeah. They got the censorship zones, right, in the UK. Censorship zones from here. You can't stand outside an abortion clinic within a certain distance, and so these freedoms are being taken away from the average citizen because Christianity, in our beliefs, are offensive to a society that wants to include every single type of faith. And as one of the preachers that's in this counter against the council very clearly said, if they don't stop this, and this injunction is criminalizing us for helping people. And if we don't stop this, it's going to go throughout all of England. So I don't think that's wrong. I think they're absolutely right. And you look at a case that happened. I just got word of it today. Livia Tasishi Bolt,
Yes.
who was convicted of holding a sign near an abortion center, which basically literally didn't have. I mean, if you look at the sign, I think I have it somewhere here. Let me see if I can pull it up. Didn't have anything offensive. I think it just basically said, "You want to talk? Here I am." I think I have it here. Yeah, here it is. Here to talk if you want. And this is in Poole. This is near Bournemouth, and she was found guilty today. It's what I was told. So it's quite.
There's a Memorial Church very near to that.
Really.
Yep.
That Mike, is that where Mike goes, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That's what it is. Yeah.
There was also a 69-year-old evangelist who died of a heart attack, where a gang of lesbians and homosexuals attacked him, and he was found guilty. And the corrupt Crown prosecutor spent 2,500 pounds British to fly a witness against him to come from Australia just to testify against this 69-year-old evangelist. Who preach, because he said homosexuality, according to the Bible, was wrong. And they attacked him physically. They threw dirt at him, and he got arrested by supposedly a lesbian policewoman who arrested him. Man. Aren't you glad that God created hell for Satan and his angels? But these people are going there.
Jacob, final thought in terms of persecution, and I want to put it right next together, is what's happening in the UK and what's happening in communist China. Not much different, although they're further down the road, but there are some laws coming in as of May 1st. 38 articles that promote the CCP and discourages and actually enforces heavy laws against any religion that gets out of line. Obviously, proselytizing, so sharing the gospel, praying, and because they would be seen as going against China's national interest. So it will damage China's national interest is how it's being played, or the social public interest, or the rights of others, or you violate public orders and customs. You see how these laws are coming in that you're violating some vague, bizarre,
We talked about this on a teaching we did years ago on the book of Daniel, when they just wanted to get the laws on the books, and then they brought accusations against Daniel. Once they got laws on the books. It's on a teaching. Yeah,
so let's pull that one up if we can, Davey. I think it's Daniel 6. I think it's I forget what it's called, but it's from Daniel 6. I know that. One of the things it targets, Jacob, is evangelism. So it will stifle any outreach because everything will be under surveillance, if not already so, because they have a social credit score. So evangelism will be almost non-existent. House church groups will be forced to go deeper underground, if you could imagine that, where they would have to really rethink of how they strategize meeting, because it would be not only heavily persecuted, but they will be under party oversight if they don't comply. And missionaries entering China will have a lot of barriers and will be at risk. And the amplification of those risk is quite heavy. Your thoughts on the CCP? Nothing new, we would say, but now they amped up the game a little bit more.
No, there was a quasi-liberalization. The first time I went to China, I had to smuggle Bibles into China from Hong Kong. Then they began allowing Bibles. But now the crackdown has come. But this is only making official something that's been going on for already getting close to more than 5 years.
More than 5 years.
Already going on more than 5 years.
Yeah,
Now,
remember Jinping had that law that came in. Jinping had that law that everything had to be in order to the CCP and you couldn't speak against the CCP.
church had to be registered with the state and so forth and licensed by the state.
Yeah. Jacob, here.
The Vatican made the deal with the devil.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up. It's the compliance of the Vatican. They actually renewed what they call the Sino-Vatican deal. And most people didn't know about this. The Sino-Vatican deal, it's a legislation that highlights this, that they made a deal, first signed in Beijing, with the Holy See in 2018. So, well, you know who that is, Xi Jinping, and of course, the gentleman from Argentina. And it reveals how deep the ties goes into the Catholic Church making deals with the communist government, because even Catholic bishops have been arrested for having any illegal mass. And yet the Cardinal defends the deal. The Pope defends the deal. So make sense of that, Jacob.
It's all politics. And look, the Vatican is always been about politics and business operating under the guise of religion. The Vatican Bank, the Ministry of Religious Works, that's actually what they call it. The name of the Vatican Bank is the Ministry of Religious Works. It is about finance and politics. It's about political power and money. That is what the Vatican is about. It's what the Vatican has always been about. Religion is simply the umbrella, the masquerade, the pretense. Catholic Church has never been about religion. It's a false religion. It's been about money and power. Going back to the Papal States.
Yeah, exactly. David Lister, your thoughts?
Well, I know that the Catholic Church has taken big hits from all the lawsuits. They don't have the money they once used to have. Many parishes are bankrupt. They're all on. Many of them are on life support, but it's still such a big institution that it has the ability to deceive many still to this day. And for whatever reason, non-religious people like a Nancy Pelosi still give power to them by going to them and saying, "Oh, Holy Pope, Holy Father, bless me." So it's weird that, they don't have the money power, but people see it as a power, much like, I guess, we will see that happen come the Antichrist.
Well, there's a reason that evangelical Christians since the 16th century have identified the Roman Catholic Church with the wicked woman in Revelation, the harlot.
That's it.
A whore who's drunk with the blood of the saints. Now, I'm not saying that the Roman Catholic Church is the only false religion in the world, but it is the biggest false religion in the world. It is a whore drunk on the blood of the saints. And if you were a Roman Catholic, please read the New Testament. It is not typical Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, again, the church aligning with worldly powers, which will eventually lead to what we see in Revelation 17.
Let's remember, the Vatican is simply the continuation of the Papal States from the Middle Ages. How did the Vatican come into being? The Lateran Treaty. Who did the Pope make the treaty with? Benito Mussolini. It is the product of a political alliance with Hitler's ally, Benito Mussolini. How did Adolf Hitler come into coalition power in Germany? Through the Centrum, the Catholic Party of Bavaria, headed by the Privy Papal Chamberlain Hans von Papen. The Catholic Church put Franco in power in Spain, a fascist. It put Mussolini in power in Italy, and it put Adolf Hitler in power in Germany. The Vatican came about because of a treaty with Hitler's ally, Benito Mussolini. That is what it is. It's about power and money, politics and corruption. Jesus Christ has nothing to do with it.
Jacob, this is a warning.
Can I,
to the
can I
Church in the
grab one
West.
thing off of that? Just
Yeah,
one
go
quick thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. It's interesting that Islam is a religion government as well as Roman Catholicism is a religious government. And they're merging. Even within the catechism, it says they have a lot in common with the Muslims who were first among the
First among the brethren of the Muslims.
That's right. Sorry, I thought it would fit right there, Marco.
That's right. Certainly, any attempt to to contact believers there will be surveilled and will be very highly scrutinized. So the underground church is now by de facto banned by virtue of the new law. So much prayer for them, much prayer for what they have suffered. This is, of course, another episode of what's been going on for a long time and since Mao in the attack on Christians in China, and the church continues to grow. And this has been the great difference, isn't it? When the persecution happens in places like China and places in Asia, the church grows. It grows bolder. It grows holier. While at the same time they suffer tremendously. The church in the West, I think, Jacob, that was my question. This is a warning to the church in the West. Look what's going on.
Yes.
Not what's coming. What's actually in a small way transpiring in Europe, and Christians in America shouldn't fall asleep because of this.
Let us be clear. The World Council of Churches and liberal Protestantism is no better.
Oh yeah, you see when I was in Oregon and I saw all that was going on in the United Methodist Church, and we're seeing worldwide. They look like Babylon.
So keep in prayer. You see what's going on. It's time to pray. It's time to pray. It is time to get God's word out. So especially if you live in the West, I used to say, especially if you live in Europe, what European believers are now going through that, UK believers are going through that, where you see these horrible laws in the horizon. You see the takeover of different cities, and yet. Yeah. I guess in some way, many people are oblivious to this. They'll watch the soccer game, they'll watch the football game, what they call it, the football game. They'll watch all kinds of things. And in America, the same thing. So wake up, church. Wake up, church. So we're over to backstage. We got some questions. But you have to keep things in prayer and keep preaching Jesus. And because we see things in the world economically, war, free speech against free speech and against Christianity. So
Can I just add one more point, Marco, about economically. The efforts of Donald Trump to reindustrialize America, to bring those manufacturing jobs back to America, and that is going to be something that's going to drive up inflation because American workers get paid more than workers in China or these other countries. Remember that with the combination of robotics and AI, and I know the dangers of AI, a lot of those jobs are going to be done robotically with computer-controlled quality control systems and things like this. Obviously, it will help the employment situation among blue-collar Americans. It will, but it's not necessarily going to drive prices up to the way that's being projected. The people who are saying that are doing so with a political anti-Trump agenda. Please pray for Mr. Trump. He's being lied against and lied against and lied against. Whether you voted for him or not, please pray for him. Please keep Mr. Trump in prayer. And please pray that God will raise his hand against judicial fascism. Thirdly,
everywhere in the world.
Please pray for Great Britain that God will intervene.
Yeah, absolutely. Much needed. We're going to go to backstage. Please send your questions. Jacob's got the answers, we hope. And send them in. We're backstage, not on YouTube, not on Facebook. We're on the other platforms that we talked about. So we'll see you back there.